And welcome back. According to a new AARP Foundation and United Health Foundation report, social distancing measures have implemented during the pandemic have actually led to an epidemic of loneliness. The report found over half of the adults aged 50 and older said they felt isolated during the onset of the coronavirus. Of those who said they experienced social isolation, half of those said they felt unmotivated, 41% were very anxious, and 37% said they were very depressed. AARP New York and 27 other organizations from across the state are urging the state assembly to pass a bill that's actually aimed at better preparing New York's long-term care system, including our nursing homes, for a potential second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as future health emergencies, and avoid repeating the mistakes of 2020. Here now to share a little bit more in our discussion, we are pleased to be joined by Beth Finkel, and Beth Finkel shares with us here, and glad to have her. She's the director of AARP New York, and Beth, welcome to Open.
Thank you so much for having me.
So when we talk about these numbers and these statistics, obviously quite startling, given the fact that when you talk about how we are as a country trying to navigate through COVID-19, looking at a second wave, it's a potential that these numbers may also continue to rise.
Yes, I think we're starting to experience it now. We know that in New York, thankfully, we've been keeping it within the safe zone. But that doesn't mean that people's anxiety is not rising because they're worried where the red zones are and the orange zones and the yellow zones. And obviously, people who are older are more fragile, and there's a good chance that they might be more susceptible. And then if they get COVID, they could experience it worse. So they have to be very careful. And government has to be very careful in how they handle older adult populations. And as you said, as you opened up this piece, that the issue is how do we balance that with feelings of anxiety, depression, and isolation. And that's something that we all have to take seriously. We all have to figure out ways to ameliorate, and that's difficult in this case.
Yeah. And so when we talk about the epidemic, the virus is an epidemic all by itself, not even an epidemic, we call that the pandemic. But when we talk about loneliness and when we talk about anxiety, this is an epidemic that's we're dealing with.
Even before the pandemic, AARP's done a lot of research on isolation. And in fact, being isolated is the equal on your health of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's pretty staggering to think of that. So that affects your whole well-being, and when you look at indicators of health, we all know that smoking is one of them, but isolation is another piece that can build into not only your immediate health, but also your long-term effects of health on your life and on your longevity. So it's something that we really have to take very, very seriously.
Yeah. But when we talk about seniors, we talk about those who are the most vulnerable population, particularly to COVID-19. And then you talk about this issue of isolation and loneliness. You got here the virus that you have to contend with, isolation and loneliness. And so it really becomes a compound effect on the lives of those who are considered the eldest.
That's exactly right. And that's why our government leaders have been really good about trying to figure out ways to make sure that we can deliver services to older adults, but at the same time be careful about not bringing them into congregate settings where they don't need to be, even though they might be craving that. And so you look at New York City and you look at the senior centers in New York City, which are such a thriving society for older adults in New York. And they deliver not just food, people can get their meals delivered, they can come in and get congregate meals and get together with their friends and their neighbors. And at the same time, people in the actual senior centers in normal times can kind of eyeball Mrs. S and say, oh, this is not good weather today, and Mrs. S came out without a coat on. What's that about? Do we need to probe a little bit and make sure that Mrs. S is in a safe, sound situation? We don't have that today, right? Because people can't get eyeballed the same way, right? very often they're in their homes. And, another way was meal delivery, where, people would linger. They do their meal delivery and then they'd be able to eyeball those. These are all great systems that have been in place, but with COVID, with the pandemic, things have changed. And so our, our government has stepped in doing wellness checks. AARP has also been doing wellness checks. We have volunteers who are calling people all across the country. If they go online to aarp.org and say that they would like some friendly visiting or someone to chat with, we will connect them with AARP volunteers from all over the country. You never know who you're going to get. You might get to go to somebody from Texas. Who knows? And they will kind of say, "How are you doing today? And here's what things are like in Texas today. How are things doing in the Bronx today?" So I recommend that on aarp.org.
Yeah, go to AARP.org and get that information that could actually be beneficial in helping you. Talk about being beneficial in helping. One of the things I do understand, though, even with seniors today, is the struggle for internet and broadband access. A lot of seniors still struggling. You would assume that in this Wi-Fi society, in this technological world, that everybody has got service. But you know, and I know, and you can share more, with more of your expertise, how it's really affecting seniors in the area of technology.
That's really interesting because although older adults are the fastest adopting of technology, there are limits depending on, again, if you're isolated, you might not have somebody who can come by your apartment and help give you a little bit of pointers, right? It's hard when you don't have any kind of support in place to help you get up to speed. And then on top of that, broadband is really, it's available, but not totally available everywhere. New York has not done thorough mapping to really understand where broadband is and where it isn't, and how well it's actually working. So it's been mapped to census data, but the problem is that it's not been double checked. So you might think it's on a full block, but you might find out that there's spottiness within that block. And we're asking state government to map it properly so people really can get a sense, so policymakers can really get a sense of what more needs to be done to ensure that broadband is there for everyone of all ages. And then on
Yeah,
top of that, it's as I said before, how do we make sure that we get the skills and training out to older adults who might need a little bit of hand holding on this? Thing I do all the time, all of us. Right? You and I both have technical problems this morning.
right.
You know, so again, there are some services in the city. There's also an organization called OATS, Older Adult Technical Services, and I really recommend people check out their services. And I know that the DIP, the New York City Department of Aging, has also been doing some great work on this. And at the same time, they've been offering a lot of virtual programming for people who can access their computers or their iPads or whatever, and that can make such a huge difference in people's lives.
Yeah. Before we go, I only got a minute left, but I want to ask you to talk a little bit about legislation that's coming up, and what New Yorkers can do in terms of supporting legislation that you guys have put forward.
Now, first of all, we would love to have them call the governor's office and ask them about this mapping that we need to be able to actually say where broadband is and isn't. City Council has also taken up this issue, so please call your City Council person. Say this is important to you. This is important to your family. As we all know, this is not just about older adults. We have kids in school who really need help. And we've got to make sure that there's internet all over the place because they can't go camp out in their libraries these days in the same way that they might have. And we need to make sure that there's an even playing field for everyone because broadband is the new most essential thing. There's the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You got food and you've got home, shelter. Uh, Broadband belongs in that same place because you cannot succeed in this modern day society. Not to even mention telehealth, and we didn't even get into that. We'd love to
Right.
talk about that, right? need to get telehealth in this world of a pandemic. We got to make sure people can get connected to telehealth first.
Right, right. And I mean, it's something that we have to take a look at, and hopefully we'll continue to follow. Beth Finkel, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us here on Open, and certainly opening our eyes to a lot of the challenges that particularly our most vulnerable population faces. Thanks a lot, Beth.
To bring this people's attention.
We encourage you, please don't go anywhere. We still have more Open coming up right after this.